The other day I went to Whole Foods for the first time. I know, look at me, shopping at Whole Foods. Of course I wasn't surprised that everything was expensive as frick. But one thing did surprise me. The price of oxtail was cheaper than anywhere else I'd seen. Of course I had to buy some to make Korean oxtail soup. This is actually a pretty easy dish to make and it'll definitely impress anyone you make it for. First thing I'm doing is rinsing the oxtails in fresh water. This is to pull out any bone fragments but also to draw out any remaining blood that will make the broth cloudy. Rinse and repeat until the water runs clear. Then I'm adding the tails to a pot, covering them with cold water, which I'm going to bring up to a boil and leave for 5 minutes. You can see the scum that forms on the top of the water here. This is what we want to remove so it doesn't end up in our final soup. Once the tails have boiled for about 5 minutes, I'm straining the liquid away, rinsing under cold water, then draining in a colander. I peeled a Daikon Radish and cut it up into fairly large segments. Then I also cut up half an onion into quarters. To a large pot or casserole dish, add the tails, Daikon Radish and onions. Fill the pot up with water until it covers everything. I'm going to bring this to a boil with the lid off, then I'm lowering the heat to medium-low, then setting this to simmer for at least 2 hours. So, that's just cooking now. That has to cook for about 2 hours, just on a low simmer. And in the meantime, I asked you guys to ask me some questions on TikTok. Let me just pull up the video now, and we'll answer some of them. What's your favorite memory attached to cooking or just food in general? For me, that's probably when 2 years ago we went to Lombok, and while we were there, we went from one of my cousin's weddings. On one day, we went down to the beach and we had these 2 mahi fish. I'll pull up a photo, and we basically just cooked them over a fire, and it was just like the most amazing thing, just sitting on like tropical weather, completely empty beach, just bonfire with the biggest fish I've ever seen, just spit roasting over a fire with like some of their local seasoning and everything. It was amazing. What's your favorite dish that you've cooked so far? On TikTok, probably, I don't know if you count as cooking, but the makgeolli was pretty fun to make because that was like a real learning experience. It's still going just over there, but the first time I did it, it went wrong, but I figured out where I went wrong, and then I've rectified the problem. What dishes would you like to learn to make from other cultures or countries' cuisines? I wouldn't mind going into like Chinese cuisine. It's not that similar to Korean cuisine, but I think it would be really interesting to learn some more Chinese dishes. What age did you start cooking and who taught you? I didn't really start cooking until like late high school, maybe even later. It was always in my family. My mom would cook the Korean food. My dad would cook everything else. And during high school, both my parents were working, so obviously we had to look after ourselves quite a bit. And then out of high school, I moved to Australia with my brother and my sister, just lived there for a year. While I was there, I picked up doing a lot of barbecuing, so because meat over there is so cheap and it's so good. And then after just barbecuing all the time, it kind of just went from there. Came back to England. Well, first I spent some time in Korea, and then I came back to England. And I started cooking a lot of like English foods, but then I realized like Korean food is much more fun to make. So I started making lots of Korean food. And I'm lucky that I live right next to like London's Koreatown, so I've got an H Mart nearby, which I can just buy food, Korean ingredients from. What's your easy but yummiest dish? I'll be honest, it's probably this. It's only like 4 ingredients. It's just that it takes time. But this is going to be so good once it comes out. How are you doing? Hope you're okay, and what motivates you? How am I doing? I'm doing fine. All things considered, with lockdown and everything, hasn't really changed my schedule because I'll be honest, I didn't really do much before anyways. Just staying home. I kind of just stay home and like play video games and stuff and cook and experiment. I have a lot of hobbies which I do around home, and especially now that I've moved back to England where it's like our family home, I can kind of do what I want. I can do a lot of long-term hobbies. Are you the only child or do you have siblings? I am the youngest of 5 children. I have 2 older brothers and 2 older sisters. I'll see if I can find a photo. I'll put it up here. So I live in this house. This is my parents' house, family house. I live here with my 1 brother and 1 sister. And I have another sister who lives in South Korea. And then my brother who lives in Sydney, Australia. If you could cook with anyone in the world, who would it be? Probably Dave Chang. David Chang and Roy Choi. I really like what they're doing because I'm not super into like the whole super high cuisine stuff, but I like how David Chang, at least these days, his show Ugly Delicious on Netflix is like really good because that's like right up my alleyway, where it's just food that tastes good, but there's not much effort put into making it look good, but it just happens to look good because that's just how it is. Most underrated Korean dish in my opinion, tofu kimchi. That is like my all-time favorite Korean food. I'll show you a picture now, but I want to make it in the future. Alright, that's enough questions for now. Keep asking questions if you want, and I'll be sure to try and answer them as much as I can. So it's been about 3 hours now that this has been simmering. I'm taking this off the heat and setting aside. I'm going to take out the Daikon Radish and onions. I'm throwing away the onions, but you can include them if you want. The Daikon Radish I'm cutting into manageable pieces so I can serve it in the dish. Now it's time to dish. Here I'm using this Korean earthenware bowl that I picked up for like £5 in my local H Mart. To the bowl I'm adding one piece of tail, some of the daikon slices, and the soup. Off camera I made this super simple garnish of gochugaru, soy sauce, fish sauce, and sesame oil. This is just to add some extra flavour and spice, but you can also add salt and pepper now to taste. I also chopped up some fresh spring onion and I'm sprinkling that on top as well. If you like this video, please make sure you like and subscribe. I'm going to try keep up with the video uploads this coming year, so it would really help a ton if you could hit those 2 buttons below. Also check out my TikTok and Instagram where I'm always uploading other cool stuff I do in my kitchen.